Does an ape man walk the uncharted forests of the American Northwest? What unknown monster of the sea grappled with this U.S. Navy frigate in South American waters? Why did people raise up this enormous circle of stones in Orkney 4,000 years ago? Who drew this giant, the largest figure in the world, on Chile's loneliest mountain? What hands fashioned the skull of doom? Does it bring death? And why do stones move by themselves in California's Death Valley? Mysteries from the files of Arthur C. Clarke, inventor of the communication satellite and author of 2001, now in retreat in Sri Lanka after a life of science, space, and writing. He ponders the riddles of this and other worlds.
Mysteries have intrigued and amused me ever since I was a child and read stories of fishes falling from the heavens, of giant sea monsters attacking ships, and luminous shapes moving through the skies.
This strange light which flew over southern England remains unidentified, but is it a spacecraft? Does this film, shot in 1936, show the Loch Ness Monster? Did it surface once more 41 years later to be captured again by the camera? Is this the footprint of the Yeti, the abominable snowman of the Himalayas? And does this shaky film taken in a forest in Northern California really show Bigfoot, another ape man who has so far eluded all his pursuers? This gruesome corpse was trawled up by fishermen in the South Pacific. Is it what it appears to be, an unknown monster of the sea? When the camera seems to capture an African snake twice as long as any ever recorded? Or a missing link killed by explorers in South America? Or an unknown species of big cat roaming the plains of Africa? Can we believe the evidence the film conveys? Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World is a 6-volume cassette series. For ordering or information on volumes 1 and 3 through 6, call 1-800-538-5856. And now, Volume 2 of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
The late Lieutenant R.E. Grimani Cox was returning home to England in 1942 when he encountered one of the Second World War's most nightmarish sea stories. His troopship was sunk by a German raider in the South Atlantic. Cox found himself on a fragile raft beset by sharks. After 5 days came a sinister assault. Cox showed the evidence later to a friend.
Well, when I looked at his leg, he pulled up his trousers and I could see scars the size of a penny, which is about 1.25 inches, the old penny, were dotted at intervals all the way up his leg. And these were white scars, sunk quite deep into the flesh, where the skin had been pulled off.
Before he died in 1971, Cox told the story to his sisters, as well as to his friend, a biologist, Professor Cloudsley Thompson.
Yes, he didn't show me that. He only showed me the...
He did that on the
Well,
legs.
he was you, his sisters, and he was. This was in the mess. There were 12 of them on the raft initially, and only 3 survived to the end of the 5 days. And one of the most horrifying things that happened while they were lying there, dying one by one from thirst, was one evening when they were attacked by a giant squid. An enormous shape appeared beside the raft, and a huge arm came over and snatched one of the men and tore him off the raft before anybody could do anything to save him. and presumably he was eaten. And they were still barely recovering from the shock of this when another arm or tentacle came over the side of the raft. He saw it silhouetted against the starlit sky, and it fastened itself on him, round his leg and round his body, particularly his right leg, because that's where the scars mainly were, he showed me, but I believe he'd said that they were on the rest of his body as well. And he'd have been pulled off just like the others, only fortunately, by that time people were alert, and so they grabbed on and held him. And instead of him being pulled over the side, the suckers pulled lumps of skin off him, off his body, and this is what caused these massive number of scars all over him.
On her maiden voyage out of San Diego, the US Navy frigate Stein also had a weird encounter. The Stein's anti-submarine sonar gear suddenly went US, unserviceable. She sailed home. Once the family reunions were over and the ship was in dry dock, Petty Officer Ira Carpenter went down to examine the underwater dome.
We noticed that there were some quite long scratches starting from the front and the side and down underneath the dome itself. The longest one, I would say, was about 4 feet long. At the bottom of each one of these cuts, or at least 90% of the cuts, was something embedded underneath the rubber coating itself. Of course, I was interested to determine what that was. I had never seen anything like this before. This type of damage was brand new to me. So I used my knife to pick out this foreign object underneath the no-foul coating. And it looked to me like it was a claw. And I quipped to my SW officer at the time. I said, look here, it looks like we have been attacked by a bunch of small alligators.
Navy biologist F.G. Wood.
This is a small piece of the no-foul covering that was taken from the sonar dome of this ship. In many of these cuts were found teeth or claws, such as this one. And it's apparent that whatever did this damage grasped the dome and ripped all the way through this rubber covering to the metal below.
The claw, it looked like it had been wrenched out of whatever had put it there.
I think that it must be from a squid, because squids do have claws or hooks similar to this. Nothing else that is known in the ocean has structures of this kind. This doesn't rule out something that we haven't found yet, because undoubtedly there are creatures in the sea that are not yet known to science.
The Stein has since remained unscathed. But although no full-grown giant squid has ever been caught, a hint of what such creatures may be like seems to surface oddly about every 30 years in the far north, in the cold waters of the Labrador Current. This is St. John's, Newfoundland, the wartime convoy base on Canada's Atlantic coast, and headquarters for Dr. Frederick Aldrich and his team.
This is a giant squid of the species Architeuthis dux. It came ashore on November the 22nd, 1979 at St. Brendan's on Collier's Island in Bonavista Bay, Newfoundland. It's an immature female. It is a small female, but it is a giant squid. During World War II, as ships would leave the harbor, they would be torpedoed by submarines, and when the survivors would go over the sides and hit the life rafts, giant squid would surface, pull them off of the rafts, and take them to their deaths under the surface. I cannot help but speculate that what we know about squid and its attraction to red, I just wonder if the red life jacket of the traditional Mae West life jacket might not have been a contributing factor in the death of those seamen. These are typical suckers on an arm of the giant squid. And you'll see that in addition to the suction cup, each sucker is fitted with a ring of teeth, so that when this sucker is applied to either prey or predator, These teeth are set and anchored into the flesh at the same time that the suction cup makes contact with the flesh of the other animal. The entrance to the mouth is guarded by these large beaks, much like the beaks of a parrot, and they tear pieces off of the prey or the predator, as the case may be. The tongues and the lips of sperm whales bear sucker scars, which are approximately 12 inches in diameter. I believe that giant squid reach an approximate maximum size of something like 150 feet. If this is 20 feet long, well then it's almost 8 times longer than this in overall length, and that's a big squid.
Now that we know that the giant squid is attracted to red, I'm making sure that my equipment is an appropriate color, yellow.
Whatever size giant squid may reach, it does now seem that there really are giant octopuses, and that this man, Professor Joseph Gennaro of New York University, has evidence that one came ashore on this Florida beach in 1896. It was a local doctor, DeWitt Webb, who took charge of the carcass at Anastasia Beach, St. Augustine. He and his helpers had to use 4 horses plus 3 sets of blocks and tackle to move the body 6 tons or more up the beach. The mere stump of the one remaining tentacle was truly awesome, 32 feet long.
Perhaps an effective example of the size of the octopus which might be represented by Webb's find would be to first look at the common octopus in this position and realize that Webb's octopus would actually stretch tip to tip from here to the red car up the beach. Part of the material eventually landed in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. And all that remains of the octopus of the deep is this piece of tissue. Notice that it is sinewy and fibrous in its structure, something in the nature of beef or soup meat. When I examined these tissues, I found that that pattern, looked at in the polarizing light of the polarizing microscope, was most similar to that of the true octopus. All this gives me strong reason to believe that what Dr. Webb found was indeed a gigantic specimen of octopus.
Almost every year, surprising discoveries are made in the ocean. As recently as 1976, the U.S. Navy accidentally dredged up a totally unknown and quite large shark, the ferocious-looking megamouth, weighing almost a ton. And for centuries, there have been reports of the so-called Great Sea Serpent. Scores of captains have recorded such sightings in their ship's logs. And no skipper makes an entry in his log without a very good reason.
This happened to a Norwegian ship, and this was the monster reported by HMS Daedalus. The crew of the city of Baltimore saw the head of a serpent in the Gulf of Aden, and the bowsprit of the British banner was chewed up by a serpent in 1860. The only systematic attempt to analyze reports of the sea serpent has been launched by 2 Canadian scientists, John Seibert and Paul LeBlanc. They've concentrated on the coastal waters off Vancouver. Dozens of sightings were reported.
There were at least 25 of them who would describe species not really known to marine biology.
Seashelt, a 30-minute flight north of Vancouver, is the location of yet another report needing investigation. A local boy, John Andrews, was fishing off a pier when his sighting occurred.
Could you tell us exactly what it looked like? I guess it looked pretty much like a long snake-like thing with fins on it. And at first sight of it, I saw a head about 1.5 feet long, about 8-9 inches wide. And it had large cat-like eyes and they reflected light like a cat's, and they could move in opposite directions. One was looking at me and one at the bottom. And then I noticed that it was about the thickness of my thigh, about almost a foot around.
The body of the animal.
Yeah, the body itself. And it was, after it had swum underneath me, I noticed it was probably about 40 or 50 feet long.
Did it have fins?
Yeah, it had 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and it swam undulated, like up and down instead of side to side. And it swam right under me.
It's difficult to say what kind of creature John saw. It certainly doesn't match well with any kind of known mammal or any kind of known fish for that matter. The long snake-like body suggests that it's not a mammal, but its up and down undulation motion is typically mammalian.
We found that there were about 3 main categories of strange animals which had been reported. One of them was serpentine, of the kind that John Andrews described to us. There was another one with a long neck and rather coarse hair like coconut fibers, as it was described by one witness. And a third category also had a long neck, but was sometimes mentioned to have a mane, and sometimes also mentioned to have horns, with a head looking like that of a sheep or like that of a giraffe.
None of the witnesses in the survey were professional artists. But it's clear enough from the drawings in their questionnaires what they thought they saw. This is John Andrews' sketch of his sighting. Margaret Stout saw this in 1961, and David Miller saw this creature off Discovery Island. But it may be that the body of such a sea monster has fallen into the hands of man. In September 1977, this Japanese fishing boat was off the east coast of New Zealand when it trawled up in its nets a mystifying carcass. The Japanese TV networks were excited enough to helicopter teams out over the South Pacific and winch their reporters down onto the ship at sea. On the deck of the Zuyo Maru, the skipper talked to journalists.
On April the 25th at about 10:30, we noticed something big caught in the nets. It was a red, fleshy object which smelled very strongly. We didn't know what it was, so I went for my camera and flash gun.
Sadly, the body itself was afterwards thrown back. But early in 1980, one of the world's leading fisheries experts, Professor Fujio Yasuda, arrived for a conference in London with such evidence as remains.
This is all the evidence about the unknown creature dredged from the sea by the Zuyo Maru off New Zealand on the 25th of April 1977. These photographs were taken by Mr. Yano of Taiyo Fisheries. The real half of the body was rotten and dropped off. As you can see in this photograph, the surface of the body is covered with a fat-like substance. This is the drawing made by Mr. Yano after measuring the creature. I can't think of any known fish which has this shape. I can't tell what this creature is, but I assure you that it is completely unknown to us.
But sea monsters don't only materialize in the remote oceans. In 1976, just 30 miles off the Lizard in Cornwall, 2 fishermen, George Vinicum and John Cox, also met a monster.
Well, it went steaming 30 miles off, 25 to 30 miles off. Saw what I thought was an upturned boat on the horizon.
So we went over to investigate. When we got closer, we could see it wasn't an upturned boat. It was something that, well, neither of us have seen before. So it was dark in color and had sort of humps on the back. I should say it was, well, between 15 and 18 feet in length and rising above the sea about 3 feet. It was a flat, calm day. There was no disturbance on the sea at all.
When we got up closer,
But a little closer, I came astern, to our amazement, up out the water about 3 feet from this body, head appeared out the water. And it was a, well, thing I've never seen before after about 40 years at sea. And it gradually sank in the water and disappeared. But after talking about it, the only thing we could explain it was very much like a prehistoric animal.
The whole thing, I suppose, would have weighed, what, several tons. And equal in size, I should think, the boat we were in. Wouldn't you? The boat was 32 feet long.
Although whales and many sea creatures occasionally come ashore, there seem to be few records of a stranded sea monster. One of the most celebrated, however, occurred in 1808 beneath the cliffs of the island of Stronsa in Orkney. Precise drawings were made of the Stronsa beast at the time, and its dimensions were carefully measured. More than 50 witnesses swore to what they had seen. Today, among the other exotic exhibits at the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh, is a piece of the backbone of the Stronsa beast. It's now in the care of Dr. Jeff Swinney.
This was an animal which was described as being some 55 feet long. It was described as having a mane of hair running down the full length of the back, a tiny little head, a long neck, and many of the eyewitnesses, all the eyewitnesses who gave evidence on what they saw of this monster, quite reasonably interpreted this as being a totally new beast, a creature that they were completely unfamiliar with. Well, in the December of 1977, I was fortunate enough in being able to examine a beast which was stranded on the shore of the Tay near Carnoustie. These are the vertebrae of that animal, a basking shark. And I think the inevitable conclusion is that the animal which was stranded in Stronsa, in the Orkneys, was a basking shark. What tends to happen when a basking shark dies and the carcass rots is that the cartilages which are supporting the snout here tend to drop away. So these go, the snout goes. The large area here which contains the gill tissues falls away. So all that lot goes. And what we're left with is a small skull in this region and a long vertebral column here, which tends to give the appearance of a very small-headed creature with a long neck. The fins tend to fray out. And in the case of a male, another set of what might appear to be limbs would be in this region here, and the lower lobe of the tail tends to fall away. So what we're left with is this small-headed, long-necked creature with this long, tapering body.
But a rotting basking shark certainly doesn't explain the beast with great teeth, basking sharks are tiny, which came ashore, also in Scotland, at Gourock on the River Clyde in 1942. Being wartime, the Royal Navy wouldn't permit photographs. And finally, the beast was taken to the grounds of the municipal incinerator. On the orders of the borough surveyor, Charles Rankin, it was chopped up and buried under what is now the football pitch of St. Ninian's Roman Catholic Primary School, Gourock. Mr. Rankin.
I can't see that this carcass was a rotting basking shark. In the first place, this animal showed no signs of rotting. It was absolutely complete, unmarked. The monster measured approximately 28 feet from the tip of the nose to the end of the tail. The body, as it lay on the ground, was approximately 5 to 6 feet deep. The body could be described as having three parts: the body, the neck and the tail, and the neck and tail tapered very gradually away from the body. The animal had teeth about perhaps that size, and on both jaws. In the stomach of the creature was a small portion of what I took to be a seaman's jersey. It was an open knitted portion of some knitted material. And the other thing, strangely enough, was the corner of what is described, can be described as an old-fashioned tablecloth. Just the corner, and it was complete with tassels.
The evidence for still unknown sea monsters is almost overwhelming. As for the great sea serpent, it too probably exists, except that it may not be a serpent, and there may be several different types of animal involved. The solution to this old mystery may come quite soon. At this moment, the two greatest powers on Earth are trying to develop sonar systems which will make the seas transparent so they can track each other's nuclear submarines. Those systems will locate the sea serpent if it exists. Indeed, at this moment, the evidence for its existence may be somewhere in the Pentagon or the Kremlin.
Lake Okanagan, Western Canada, 130 miles long, 800 feet deep, and apparently abode of one of the world's most frequently glimpsed monsters, Ogopogo.
63 OV country, mainly clouds today with a high from 4 to 6 degrees. The lows tonight around the 0 mark. Wednesday, according to Old Stormy, to be...
Today, Ogopogo's the star of a phone-in on local radio station CKOV in Kelowna.
Period.
I like the sounds of CKOV.
Good morning and welcome to OV's Open Line program. I do believe that's what's going on in here this morning. Teresa, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
We're talking about the Ogopogo today. A lot of people in the area have seen it. The legend goes on for many years, and we'll be talking to some experts. I believe we've got Arlene Gall coming in. Arlene wrote a book on it.
That's right.
But we're going to go to the phone lines right now. Line 2, good morning. Hello there.
Mr. Puglish.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
You want to know about Ogopogo?
I certainly do.
Yeah, okay. I had a taxi and I took a passenger to the hospital and then I was coming down Abbott Street.
And I got far as about here. I looked at the lake. I was surprised, and I seen this thing come out of the water. Well, it's like a horse's head with the kind of horns on it. Well, he was huge, you know, standing up there. Oh my, just like a, you know, like a big serpent. Then another fellow come behind me and he says, "What are you looking at?" He says, "I see no Ogopogo over there." And he says, Where? Over there. He says, I had the door open in the car and stepped out just a little bit and he slipped back in the water, see? And he says, "Gee, look at the big waves there." And all we can see is big waves going down there to Fred's place where he had the boat rental. And they disappeared, see? And then I got all excited. I got in the car and I pulled to the willow end. And I told the people, I says, they were having breakfast, "I just seen Ogopogo." And they says, "What the heck you been drinking, eh?"
Line 4, go ahead, please.
Hello, John.
How are you?
I'm not too bad.
Good. Are you going to give me your name?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Tell me about
I saw Ogopogo off of Sarson's about 4 years ago.
Okay, you don't want to give your name on the air.
No, I don't.
You've told some people, obviously.
Yes.
Are you afraid that they might think you're a little bit of a...
Well, I had some strange phone calls. And
I get them every day. That's what they pay me for.
Well, I don't get paid for them, so I don't really want any more, thank you.
We were up on the beach having a picnic, and my daughter was on the swings when I saw this creature underneath the wharf there. And when I turned around and saw it and realized that it was the legendary Ogopogo, I just freaked out. I grabbed the baby and ran down to the beach, and I guess I yelled over and over, "That's him."
She was screaming like anything. She just couldn't believe it. Her face was red and
was fishing or whatever it was doing, and it was there for quite some time. Then it straightened out and went along those poles, and as it traveled along, just the 3 humps were showing, and they were from one of those end of those poles to the other in the space the three humps were. It traveled along the beach till about the corner over there, and then it turned and went straight across the lake. Now I would hesitate to go on the lake because it's such a huge thing that I think it could tip a boat over. And not being a swimmer, I would drown, so I haven't been on the lake since.
All right, we're going to break from the phone calls right now and introduce to you somebody that's well known in the Okanagan Valley, Arlene Gall. Arlene has written a book on the Ogopogo. Good morning, Arlene. How are you?
Good morning, John. Morning, Teresa.
Good morning, Arlene.
How many sightings have you documented?
Literally hundreds. Literally hundreds.
When was the first sighting?
The very first sighting was in 1852. The first documented sighting in 1852.
Okay, 1852, and it's now 1980. Do we take it to mean that there must be more than one Ogopogo?
There definitely appear to be more than one.
There has been a film that was made, and I think it was back in 1968. It's pretty hard not to believe when you see it right in front of your eyes. Tell us about that film this morning.
The Folden film was taken in 1968 by a gentleman by the name of Art Folden. He was returning from a trip to his home in Chase. And as he neared the Peachland area, he spotted an object out on the lake, and he said to his wife, "Look, there's Ogopogo." And she laughed at him. And he got out and started filming the creature. And what we see in the film is a large animate object moving through the water, surfacing and submerging at various speeds and at various times. And it also shows the creature taking off at very high speed, producing a massive wake. And this is the footage in the film that I like very much, because you see a creature just pushing water something terrifically with a massive wake in front, just creating huge wave action. This is believability on my part.
Have there been any recent sightings?
We've had approximately 7 to 8 sightings this year, but we have one that has been the very best sighting.
Why?
It was the Rieger family.
It was a beautiful day. The water was just as calm as glass. When I just took a look across, I could see a big wave coming. And at that time, I just didn't take much notice of it, and it kept coming closer, and I thought to myself, why would there be a wave coming if there's no wind or anything? So I called to my son. I says, "Come on back here," and I says, "Take a look and see if you think what the heck's coming down the lake here." So he took a look at it, and he says, "Gee, I don't know." So we had his grandson. My grandson was along too. And he said, "Hey, Grandpa," he says, "that's the Ogopogo." It would have ran right into us, but we had to weir the boat off alongside, and then we followed it alongside for about, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And I'd say the monster was possibly 14 to 16 feet long, which was above water, sticking above about 3 feet. And had quite a hump on the front shoulders and had a hump on the back where the tail went. And I'd say the tail was approximately, probably 30, 40, maybe 50 feet, because we couldn't see the end of it. But he did have a long tail. He had 4 legs, and I'd say the monster weighed approximately maybe 30 ton.
And his head in the front was moving from side to side. It seemed like he was looking for fish or feeding or something like that, and he was stirring up a tremendous amount of water.
If I would have never seen it, I would have never believed it. And actually, I don't care if anybody believes me or not, but I've seen this animal, and I know it's here, and I know it's a tremendous-sized animal.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for participating in the program. We're on tomorrow morning at 8:30. Have yourself a safe day. Thank you. I'm John Michaels. Bye-bye.
I'm Teresa Elvis. Bye-bye.
Across the world, the lakes that boast monsters also attract posses of intrepid pursuers, ready to take to the water at the drop of a hat. In Loch Ness, Ivor Newby plus his amphicar. In Lake Okanagan, a midnight vigil by 60 divers in search of Ogopogo. There have been red submarines, yellow submarines. A big game hunter, four-armed with a monstrous cage. In Sweden, a trap for the monster of Lake Storsjö, baited with a pig. And in Japan, sake to inebriate Issy, the monster in Lake Ikeda. And the reigning Miss Hibiscus, to inaugurate an ISI observatory with round-the-clock surveillance. Oddly, almost all the world's known monster lakes lie away from the tropics. Even the shallow waters of Loch Ree in Ireland would appear to have a mysterious occupant. Witness the testimony of 3 men of the cloth in a boat out one evening in May 1960. Father Burke, Father Murray, and Monsignor Quigley.
We were lolling about in the boat, doing nothing, hoping for a breeze would come up that we could do a bit of fishing in the night rise. When suddenly Father Quigley said, "Do you see what I see?" "What do you see?" "Look over there," says he. So I looked. Thinking something on top of the water. Hump, head out of it. Moving slightly to our right, slowly. And I remember saying, "What the hell is it?"
It wasn't, if it was a fish, you'd see some kind of commotion on the surface. Or if it was a needle-like thing, you'd see a kind of wriggle, but there was nothing at all. It could have been the periscope of a little submarine.
My reaction was one of astonishment, because I knew that it was a very large creature, larger than any fish that could have been in the lake. Afterwards, we discussed the matter and, well, we agreed that it was something in the nature of a large serpent.
They said we had been indulging too liberally or something, that we were seeing strange creatures on the water. Well, you can say quite honestly that we didn't have a single thing in the way of nourishment on that particular day.
Maybe it was a crocodile. It was an Irish crocodile.
But the rarely seen beast of Loch Ree is shyness personified, beside the granddaddy of all the lake monsters.
Here is the most unusual film of recent years, for it proves the existence of a monster in Loch Ness. The loch is 21 miles long, 1.5 miles broad, and 900 feet deep. The crosses on this diagram reveal where it is stated that the monster has been most frequently seen in the past. The arrowheads indicate where it has been seen on the road and shore. And this is the point our cameramen were stationed at when, after a long and arduous vigil, they actually filmed it. Through our telescopic lenses, we saw the grey waters suddenly heave as the monster cut through them with lightning speed. Climatic conditions and exposure day and night to bleak and stormy weather affected our film, which accounts for the misty results. But this is unimportant in comparison to the achievement of filming the monster itself for the first time in history.
This film was taken in 1936, 2 years after a London surgeon, R. Kenneth Wilson, snapped the most famous Loch Ness picture of them all. Also in 1934, this strange photograph. Is it a flipper? Metal worker Hugh Gray took this after church one Sunday. And in 1951, Lachlan Stewart's classic picture of the humps. Does this dawn picture show a monster or a wave? Is this the monster's flank, or just a fake? And does this 1977 picture show the monster's head and neck? 50 years of photographs have served only to deepen the mystery, yet the eyewitnesses are insistent. In this boat, a handful of the 3,000 people who've now reported seeing the monster. Alex Campbell, water bailiff on the loch for 47 years, who believes he's seen it 18 times. Peter McNabb, a banker from Irvine, who took a famous picture in 1955. Accountant Peter Smith and his wife Gwen from Luton, who in 1977 took the most recent film.
I was stunned, taken aback, shut my eyes 3 times to see that I wasn't imagining things, and then the head, neck, huge hump body, perfectly clear without any doubt, and I knew right away that that creature was scared because of its behavior. The head was growing like that, quite, whoa, fantastic. And then I realized it realized itself. The trawlers were present, As soon as the bow of the first trawler came within my line of vision, naturally it was within its line of vision. Oh, heavens. Plunged out of sight, gone. Well, I estimated the length of the body at 30 feet at least. The height of the head, neck above water level, 6 feet. And the colour of the skin was grey.
I saw something beginning to surface. And in a state of very great excitement, took down the camera, fitted on the long focus lens without looking at anything. By the time I looked up, this creature was showing a black, undulating, or rather a dark-coloured, undulating creature, a live creature. I lifted the camera, took this shot, which was naturally rather hazy because I had to hold this long focus camera. There's camera shake, excitement, and all the rest. In the picture is the tower of Urquhart Castle. I understand it's a 40-feet high tower, which gives an excellent impression of the overall length of the monster. It's been estimated at between loosely 30 and 40 feet. Before I could get a second shot or anything else, as far as I remember, because it's all hazy now with the excitement, it was gone.
Well, we were standing on the south shore of the loch, some way up here, looking sort of across the loch. Peter was looking down at an oil drum somewhere further down, and I was looking across at the castle, just having a look at it, and this thing suddenly came vertically up out of the water.
Well, my first impression was of a periscope-like object which had a slight lean to it in the water, although the head part seemed to be held horizontally. It appeared to rise up a considerable height, at least the height of a man, and it was, I would say, a good foot thick.
With the naked eye, it was just a black pillar shape with a rectangular-shaped head on the top.
At one point, I watched it actually turn its head through about 90 degrees, because normally it was in profile, but the head slowly turned round until it appeared as though it was either looking directly at us or directly away from us. And when it did this, it appeared to be the same thickness as the neck. It disappeared as a separate entity, and then it turned back again the same way as before.
I've no doubt that the eyewitnesses have seen and indeed photographed something quite real. But it could have been a skull of fish, the wake of a boat, seabirds, a seal. Many possibilities have been suggested. The trouble is, it's very easy to be mistaken. For example, this looks like the most famous Loch Ness monster photo ever made, but actually it was taken right here. We're at the entrance of Trincomalee Harbour. Believe it or not, an elephant used to swim across this opening. And the island on the right is called Elephant Island for that reason. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting that any of the Loch Ness sightings were due to swimming elephants, but this does show how easily it is to be mistaken.
But for all that, for half a century, the lure of Loch Ness has inspired men to hunt for the monster. Most dedicated of all the sleuths, Tim Dinsdale, once an aeronautical engineer, now a veteran of 20 summers living afloat on the loch, with some classic monster tales in his locker.
I saw an object about 250 yards away, as near as I can guess, which came out of the water, sort of, at first I thought it was a cormorant's neck, but then, of course, you could see that it wasn't a cormorant because it was too big, and it came out like a black snake, like a black anaconda. That's what it looked like. It came out of the water like that, and then it went down, and there was a boil of white foam. And then it broke surface once again with a boil and went on. I didn't see it again. Very quick, seconds, but it was real. And it had a startling effect on me, as it does, I think, when you get moderately close to these things. It suddenly becomes tremendously alive. And the first thing I did was put my life jacket on. You see, I don't normally wear one because you can't live in them, quite frankly. I've got them around, but the first thing I did was put it on.
Dinsdale's lonely vigil on the loch began on April the 23rd, 1960. He was driving along the shore when something caught his eye.
I saw this immense, extraordinary object. It looked like a back of a huge animal, reddish-brown. It stood 2 or 3 feet out of the water, 4 or 5 feet across, probably nearly as long as this boat, quite motionless, reddish-brown, and a blotch on the left flank, which I could see very clearly. And then, while I was watching it, started to move. A most electrifying moment. This huge thing started to surge away across the water. and I turned the camera and I shot about 40 feet of black and white film at extreme range, but nevertheless it was on film. This hump going across the water made a huge glassy wake, no prop wash visible, and then it approached the far shore and then turned through 90 degrees and progressed under the surface, throwing up a wave which has since been measured on the film at a height of about 2 feet. In 1966, the Royal Air Force long-range photographic experts studied the film, and they said the film is not faked. It's taken from approximately the place stated at Loch Ness, which is about 300 feet up on the shore. The object seen is neither a surface boat nor a submarine. It moves up to a speed of 10 miles an hour, and a cross-section through it, a sausage slice, would be 6 feet in width, and as 3 feet of it is above the surface, they estimate will be at least 2 feet below. And finally, they said we think it is probably animate, alive.
If there is a monster in Loch Ness, it now has much more than the camera to steer clear of. The high-technology team, led by Roger Parker, leave their shoes on the shore to reduce noise when they go stalking with their ultra-sensitive underwater surveillance gear. Their launch is stacked with £40,000 worth of top-notch gadgetry. Not just cameras, but microphones, hydrophones, machines for monitoring disturbances of the mud on the bottom, and most significant of all, sonar, as Roger Parker explains.
It's quite famous, this particular instrument we have before us, as we did in fact on our very first visit to the loch, record a large animal in excess of 43 feet in length. And we had it, in fact, on this screen here for over 1.5 hours. The particular animal that we detected, being, although it was large, had in its shadow what appeared to be a baby. And a baby, I mean a mere 20 feet. On the second sighting of two smaller ones, which was some nights later, we recorded these on 16mm colour film during the night. But on the sonar screen, they can be seen quite closely together, representing like a series of joined dots, which of course is the reflective pulses from the transmitted signal from this sonar transmitter. They are both fairly close together, as can be seen, and we firmly believe by the sheer echo and by the nature of the signal we receive, they must be large animate objects. In actual fact, the termination of that long-term and most interesting encounter was the fact that somebody in a local yacht, presumably on holiday, was unaware of the excitement we were having and decided to use the loo at around about sort of 5:30 in the morning. So you gather one thing from that Nessie doesn't like flushing toilets.
But it's American lawyer Bob Rhines who's come closest to proving the monster exists using strobe cameras.
When these cameras are suspended in the water and are taking pictures, normally they are rather steady because there aren't very many underwater currents in Loch Ness. And we did have a rare episode once in 1975 when we think one of the animals started disturbing our whole rig. And it bumped into it, knocked it, turned it upside down, and the camera pointed up towards the surface, took a picture of the boat, and all of a sudden, in one frame, we took a picture. We think that is of the open mouth and head of one of these animals. That's a picture that's pretty difficult to say what it is because it doesn't look like what most zoologists expected from the kind of animal they think the Loch Ness Monster may be. But that's the data, it's the true data, and that's the picture that was taken.
Then came the startling head, neck, and flipper shots of 1975.
We think we're looking at an animal that may be from 30 to 50 feet long, has a long neck, a very powerful neck, probably a small head. Flippers, at least some of which are somewhat diamond-shaped, and a powerful tail. And we'd like the zoologist to put the name on that. As a lawyer, I can quote what some of our British barristers have told us, that if the Nessie story had been a murder case, there'd have been a hanging long since.
Frankly, I'm much more skeptical of lake monsters than of sea monsters. Because lakes, after all, are fairly small bodies of water, and there are plenty of eyewitnesses around them. And if these creatures come up to breathe, why aren't they seen more often? And if even the Japanese can't catch them, can they really exist?